Okay, so we are on the 21 irrefutable laws of leadership, and we're talking about the law of empowerment today. So this is the law of empowerment. And what John says is only secure leaders give power away. Only secure leaders give power away. That's the whole purpose of the law of empowerment. And it is an absolute law of truth that if you're secure in your leadership, you will look to give it away. In version 1.0 of Dave, I was kind of living like the king of the hill, right? Where the king of the hill, do you guys know how to play the king of the hill? How does the king of the hill go?
No, well,
Push everybody else off the hill.
Just push everybody else off the hill. He's trying to get up the hill, you push him off the hill, and maybe you're successful enough and someone else knocks you off the hill. But the whole point of it is how do you knock people off the hill? And in that whole concept is a lot of insecurity.
Yeah.
Like you're just thinking, okay, I got to beat people up all the time to stay up here.
Yeah.
And the reverse of that is that just keep giving power away. Here, you take that, you run with that, you take charge of that, right? I want you to decide that, make that decision, right? Those are the things that a secure leader will do. And so John says, I've never met a leader that was insecure. I've never met a leader that was power conscious or position conscious that empowered people well. Okay. So, the insecure person is always jockeying for position, jockeying for power, jockeying for the spotlight, to be shone on them. They want to get all the credit for everything. And so that's the insecure leader.
Yeah.
The secure leader says, I don't want this spotlight. I want someone else to be lifted up, right? And the irony of that is if you do that, you'll actually get the spotlight.
Yeah, it's true.
So it's because your intention wasn't that. It'll happen by osmosis. And so, but if your aim is that, it's really the people will pick up on it.
Yeah.
There was a guy I almost hired someone when I went through the reference check. They actually said to me immediately, they said, get away from him. I said, well, why? And they said, well, he's just learned how to use people. And then he tells the people above him that he was the one that pulled it off. And he does that consistently. This guy worked with him for years. And he goes, he just is always kind of never really in the mix and helping people, but then he wants to take all the credit, right, for everything. I was like, okay. So that's a guy that's super insecure, right? He just always wants the power and always wants the fame, but he never wants to really pour into people, essentially, if that makes sense. So does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah, he wants to be the king of the hill.
Wants to be the king of the hill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not people off.
Sadly, human tendency is selfish by nature.
100%.
We all struggle with it in some way.
Oh yeah.
But it's like, how do we overcome that?
Yeah.
And
yeah.
If I think you have a good culture and a good foundation, you never have to worry about it,
Yeah.
because you know that no matter what, you're gonna get the recognition
Yeah.
you deserve,
Yeah.
with the right people.
Yeah.
And for the right reasons too.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah.
What about you?
That sounds like it's like compounded even with like a fear of failure, because if he's not involved and it goes south, he can just kind of say, well, I wasn't involved in that,
Yeah.
and not get pinned with the failure. So it could just be like coming from that space too, but also, the selfish and wanting to take credit for it.
Yeah, you can definitely you could pass the buck off and go, well, I wasn't involved in that, thankfully.
Yeah.
But if things go well, he's like, well, that was because of me.
Yeah.
It's like the little kid that I was playing baseball with on Levi's team that looked at me and he goes, I'm pretty much the whole reason we won the game. Right? Like, oh, first of all, we didn't win the game, just FYI. Second of all, no, it wasn't. Oh, I laughed. but-
Baseball is suddenly a one-man sport.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, wow, didn't know you scored every point. So John goes through 5 steps of equipping. This is the kind of delegate manager, essentially. Okay. So the first one, the first steps in this whole thing is I do it, right? I wouldn't ask you to do anything I haven't done. So the first part is I do it, because you have to understand what it is that you're asking people to do. The second step is I do it with you, with me, right? You watch me so I can equip and release you to do later. So the second step in the delegating is I do it with you, with me. Okay. The third step is empowerment begins. You do it, and I'm with you and observe and coach. So feedback, right? We know we talked about giving feedback. Okay, how did that go? Is there anything you change? Things like that. Number 4 is you do it, right? Many stop here and, kind of miss the magic, right? So then you do it, and then you do it with someone else is with you. So this is the multiplication process I keep talking to you guys about. Like, okay, now you do it, bring somebody else in it, teach it to somebody else, right? Pass that baton on to other people.
Right.
And that's how the multiplication process happens, right? So yeah, so just let's go back through that real quick. So I do it. I do it with you and with me. Empowerment begins when you do it and I'm with you and observe you, coach you, give you feedback. And then you do it. Okay, so now the person that was watching is doing it. And then that same person should then do it the same way, right? With somebody else and go back through that process.
That's right.
That makes sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
What are your thoughts about that so far?
Yeah, I think it's more of like I get that competency, and I pass that down to the next person.
Yeah.
And then they'll either keep doing it that way or make it better even.
Yep.
And then continue to build and guide and lead off that. But
Right.
I do think it is nice when someone actually like understands how to do it from the start, because then imagine we start doing loans and we've never done it before, and how much complicated that would be for anyone we serve. So it's just good to have the competency and then build off that and make it better. And we've done it with like hiring, we've been doing it with our process, we've been doing it with our work together, Tom and I, and it just makes things just move.
That's great. That's good.
I like that it kind of lines up with like model the way, inspire a shared vision, enable others to act, and then encourage the heart. It's kind of, in a way, it's like you're not really challenging the process, until somebody's kind of understood it or in there. But yeah, no, I think it's a good way to train or pass along.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think one of the things I would add in here too is there's times when you might not follow this exact thing yourself, but you would still probably incorporate those things. So for example, if you have never hired somebody or gone through a recruiting process, right? You might hire somebody that has. Right.
That's right.
And then you can learn from that and have other people learn from that process too.
That's right.
So there is ways to utilize the same thing, even though you don't have experience. Does that make sense? So you're still finding the who, and then you're kind of going through that process. You can learn it too, right? Like I've never done, Google Ads. I'm probably never going to learn how to do Google Ads. But I can hire somebody who has, and then I can hire somebody who's going to, like Luana, who's going to learn that process and eventually take over. Does that make sense? So you could still incorporate the same thing, but you may not be the one that does it. Does that make sense?
It's true.
So you just, because again, you can't do everything,
Can't be everything.
but you have to try to think through this. How am I going to incorporate this? Right. This is still areas that I need to improve in too. Like, okay, I could probably improve in that. Right. So it's a great model. You just may not do the exact thing of doing it, but you have to figure out how do you make sure it does get done. Right.
Yeah,
So
that's right.
does that make sense?
Mhm.
100%.
Yeah. So just something to think about.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point too, because like you're not expected to know how to do everything.
No.
You can't, it's impossible. But
Yeah.
what you can do is be willing to accept that, but then also provide the who for the other who, and then empower them to then be able to take that on.
Right. Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So just I bring that, I'm just kind of adding that in. That wasn't even in here because it just always try to think of like, how does this play out in real life? And that is how we would manifest that. So as a leader, because you might go, well, crap, Dave, like, how am I going to do this and that? Yeah, it's like, well, no, that's where you have to learn to go, who's the who I need to click to and to leverage that to be able to get done.
That's right.
So you can still apply it, not necessarily be the one who does it.
Yeah.
Make sense?
That's right.
Doesn't mean you let go completely. You still oversee or manage or make sure stuff's getting done, but you're going to have to kind of realize you're probably not going to do it.
Yeah.
This because you can't as a leader. You want to know enough to be dangerous.
Yeah.
As I'm doing the fund, I'm learning this. I'm like, I have the slightest idea. Now, I'm raising money and, doing a bunch of stuff. A lot of these things are like, okay, this is new. I'm muddling through it a little bit, just enough to be dangerous. So I'm like, okay, I kind of understand enough so that I can hire somebody to know whether they're better or not.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Like I've hired enough and recruited enough to kind of know like that's not good or that is good, right? So it's good to kind of have enough of like, okay, I understand, but you don't need to be an expert in all things. You got to pick your lane. So John says, work yourself out of a job and I'll give you another one, right? We talk about this here. Don't be afraid to work yourself out of your job because it's just there'll be another one for you. And we need to have that mentality and pass that on. And then the principle of empowerment, the more that I lift you, the more I lift myself. The more then I free you up, the more I free myself up. Okay, so think about that. The more I lift you, the more I lift myself. The more then I free you up, the more I free myself up. Okay. So that's the process of empowerment, is just always asking, who am I pouring into? How do I give more power away? And then that's adds to more freedom.
Yep.
And obviously the blessing dualistically is that somebody else gets to accomplish their goals. I was on the phone with this guy that's doing a little internship with us on the fund. Fernando, super sharp kid. And so today I just spent the first 15 minutes. I'm like, tell me about it. Like, what's important to you? Like, I'm like, he goes, math. I love math. I'm passionate about math. And I said, well, tell me a story of when you were a kid, how that applied. Like, why was that so important? He's like, well, I used to be a little mischievous and all these kids would get tickets for doing the right thing. And he goes, I never got any tickets. So he said, I started a business in grade school where I would take everybody's ticket and build an algorithm and like turning it into an investing thing. I was like, that is super cool. So I looked at him and I said, that's not going to take you far enough. He goes, what do you mean? I said, math is math and it's cool, but I really need to know like why this is so important to you. Like you need to spend some time thinking about like, why does this really even matter? Like, who cares? I said, because at some point you'll just go, I've really had financial success. You'll be miserable because you haven't really figured out, why do I want to do this so bad? Like, who's it going to impact? And he never even heard that or thought about that before. So I said, I need you to do that as a task when you come back. I want you to share it with me. Like, what are these things? So your job as a leader in every area is to constantly give power away. So any thoughts or comments on that?
That's fantastic. It's a great call. Tom, I'll let you go first. I keep going.
Yeah. No, I think yeah, it's definitely counterintuitive to think to work yourself out of a job. You know, and probably in some organizations it probably would be scary and probably wouldn't work. So it's probably you got to be in the right spot for that too. I remember when I was at Wells Fargo, I found a way to, like, we had to order titles and appraisals and like reports on all of our files, and I found a way to make the system do it in like less than 30 seconds when it would normally take like a person probably like 5+ minutes to do. And showed it to the head of the vendor ordering department, and he's just like, basically, no, to get rid of this, delete it. And I'm like, dude, like this would like flawlessly do this every time in less than 30 seconds. He's like, just get rid, no, don't just get rid of that. And I did share it with his team, and they just kept on using it and kept, they did their thing quicker than they were supposed to, and it kind of like dropped their volume, but he was not appreciative of it.
Wow.
But it's kind of interesting that people do have that mentality. And I don't blame him in Wells Fargo, because it's like, well, they're just gonna, okay, your position's gone, so are you. But in the right organization, like if something like that, if we could automate Dan and move Dan to something else.
Be a greeter. Be a greeter.
Yeah, we'd have like the best greeter in the business. That concierge touch.
Midas touch. I'll be the Lebanon guy.
Exactly. Like that would 10x us. Not getting rid of Dan, but moving him to something bigger and better.
Exactly. 100%. Yep. That's good.
Yeah,
good word.
Good point, Tom. Yeah, it's it's interesting. It impacts development when you do not work yourself out of a job.
Yeah.
Because it's like, I had the same experience. I think the worst thing, it was the best but worst thing for me, it was like starting with a big company out of college.
Yeah.
Because I would also come in with ideas, and it was like, well, we have best practices. Why would we ever do that?
Yeah.
So it just shuns your development in a way that's like, just follow the rules that are already in place, and then you don't really have to think.
Yeah.
And so I look at, the up and coming leaders like Mackie, Lana, and I'm like, they're set up for such a good future leadership process, because they're given the keys to innovate and be unique and different, and we're never going to hold them back. We're just going to keep encouraging them. Encouraging them to fail, succeed, and also just building them up. So, Tom, I know you've been through it. I've been through it, and I still struggle with it to this day. But at the same time, it's been really fun, just like getting out of that and kind of like reforming how I think and how the brain works. And it's like, it's okay to take a couple shots and take a couple risks, because I've never once regretted it. So just keep that learning.
It's great. Good words, guys. That's the